Chapter 1: Why You Need Emotional Detachment. Before watching the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. New audiobook videos are posted on this channel every day. Let me start with something you might recognize. There's this feeling. This constant state of alertness. It's as if you're always scanning the room, reading between the lines, interpreting every word, every glance, every silence. It exhausts you, doesn't it? This perpetual vigilance. This sense that you must decode what others mean, what they truly think, what they might do next. And beneath all of it, there's an invisible weight. A storm that never quite passes. A tension that sits in your chest, waiting. Here's what I want you to consider. All of this, the overthinking, the emotional turbulence, the constant need to make sense of everything around you, has a common source. It's not that you're broken. It's not that you're too sensitive or too weak. It's that you've learned, perhaps without realizing it, to entangle yourself too deeply with the emotional currents of the world around you. You've become like a sailor who ties himself to the mast during a storm, thinking it will keep him safe. But instead, every wave that hits the ship hits him too. Every surge, every crash, every violent motion is absorbed directly into his body. He cannot move freely. He cannot adjust. He is bound to the chaos. This is what happens when you don't practice emotional detachment. You become bound to the chaos. Now, let's pause for a moment. Because when most people hear the term emotional detachment, they recoil. They picture coldness. They imagine someone sitting alone in a gray room, staring blankly at a wall, feeling nothing, caring about nothing. They think of sociopaths, narcissists, people who have turned their hearts to stone. And so they reject the idea entirely. They say, I don't want to be like that. I want to feel. I want to care. I want to be human. And that's exactly right. You should want those things. But here's the misunderstanding: emotional detachment is not about shutting down your heart. It's not about numbing yourself or becoming indifferent to the world. It's about reclaiming your mental freedom. It's about learning to observe without being consumed. To care without being destroyed. To love without losing yourself. Think of it this way. Imagine you're standing by a river. The water is flowing, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent. Now, you can choose to jump into that river and let the current carry you wherever it wants. You'll be fully immersed, fully affected by every rock, every rapid, every twist and turn. Or, you can stand on the bank. You can watch the river. You can understand its patterns. You can appreciate its beauty. And when you choose, you can step in. But you're not at its mercy. You're not drowning. You're choosing. That's emotional detachment. It's the ability to stand on the bank of your own experience and choose when to engage, how deeply to engage, and when to step back. So why do so many of us fail at this? Why do we find ourselves constantly swept away by the emotional currents around us? The answer lies in three fundamental patterns. Three mechanisms that most people are completely unaware of. And once you understand them, once you truly see them operating in your own life, everything changes. The first mechanism is what I call excessive entanglement. This is when you allow the emotional states, the opinions, the moods, the judgments of others to penetrate too deeply into your sense of self. You hear a critical comment, and it doesn't just land on the surface. It sinks in. It becomes part of how you see yourself. You witness someone else's anger, and instead of recognizing it as their experience, you absorb it. You carry it. You make it yours. This happens because, at some point, you learned that your value is determined externally. Maybe it was in childhood. Maybe it was in a relationship. Maybe it was in a work environment where approval was scarce and criticism was abundant. Wherever it began, the pattern was set: your worth is not inherent. It must be earned. It must be validated. And so you became hypersensitive to the signals around you. You learn to read the room, to adjust, to please, to avoid rejection at all costs. But here's the problem. When you live this way, you're not really living your own life. You're living a reflection of what you think others want you to be. You're a mirror, constantly adjusting its angle to catch the light of external approval. And mirrors don't have their own light. They only reflect. The second mechanism is the need for control. This one is subtle. Because on the surface, it doesn't look like a problem. In fact, it often looks like responsibility. Like care. Like maturity. You tell yourself, I just want things to go well. I just want to make sure everyone is okay. I just want to prevent disaster. And so you plan. You anticipate. You try to manage every variable. You attempt to control outcomes, people, circumstances, emotions. But here's what happens. The more you try to control, the more anxious you become. Because the world is fundamentally uncontrollable. People are unpredictable. Events unfold in ways you cannot foresee. And every time reality deviates from your expectation, it feels like a personal failure. It feels like you've done something wrong. And so you double down. You try harder. You grip tighter. And the tighter you grip, the more exhausted you become. Neuroscience shows us something fascinating here. When you're in a state of chronic control seeking, your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for threat detection, is constantly activated. Your nervous system is in a persistent state of fight or flight. And this isn't just psychological. It's physiological. Your cortisol levels rise. Your heart rate variability decreases. Your immune system weakens. You're literally living as if you're under constant threat. And why? Because you're trying to control what cannot be controlled. The third mechanism is the most insidious. It's the search for external validation. This is the belief, often unconscious, that you need others to confirm your worth, your decisions, your identity. You look outside yourself for permission to feel good. You need someone to say, you're doing great. You need someone to acknowledge your efforts. You need someone to see you. And when that recognition doesn't come, or when it comes in a form you didn't expect, you feel lost. You feel unseen. You feel like maybe you don't matter. This is where the inner storm truly begins. Because you're now dependent on something you cannot control. You've handed over the keys to your emotional well-being to other people. And most of the time, they don't even know they have those keys. They're just living their lives, preoccupied with their own struggles, their own insecurities, their own survival. And you're waiting. Hoping. Needing. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt truly at peace? Not distracted. Not numb. Not pretending. But genuinely at peace. Can you remember? For many people, the answer is either I can't remember or maybe when I was a child. And that's telling. Because children, before they're conditioned otherwise, have a natural form of emotional detachment. They feel things intensely, yes. They cry, they laugh, they rage. But they don't carry it. They don't ruminate. A child can be devastated one moment and completely fine the next. Why? Because they haven't yet learned to tie their identity to external outcomes. They haven't yet learned to overthink. They haven't yet learned to fear their own emotions. But then life happens. Socialization happens. Trauma happens. And slowly, imperceptibly, we learn to entangle ourselves. We learn to control. We learn to seek validation. And we lose that inner peace. Here's the thing, though. You can get it back. Not by becoming a child again. Not by regressing or pretending the world doesn't affect you. But by consciously, deliberately, learning to detach. By recognizing when you're being swept into the river and choosing to step back onto the bank. By seeing the storm for what it is, something external, something temporary, something that does not define you. This isn't easy. It requires awareness. It requires practice. It requires a willingness to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to fix it or explain it or make it someone else's fault. But it's possible. And more than that, it's essential. Because without emotional detachment, you'll spend your entire life reacting, responding to triggers, being pushed and pulled by forces outside your control. Never fully present. Never fully free. So let me offer you this. What if the problem isn't that you feel too much? What if the problem is that you've been taught to feel the wrong things? What if the exhaustion you carry isn't from caring too deeply, but from caring about things that were never yours to carry in the first place? Think about it. How much of your mental energy is spent worrying about what someone else thinks? How much time do you spend replaying conversations, analyzing tone, trying to figure out if you said the wrong thing? How often do you lie awake at night, not because of something you did, but because of something you imagine someone else might think about what you did? This is the cost of entanglement. This is the price of living without emotional detachment. And it's too high. Because while you're busy managing the emotional weather of everyone around you, your own inner landscape goes neglected. Your own needs go unmet. Your own voice goes unheard. And here's the paradox. The more you detach emotionally, the more present you actually become. The more you step back from the chaos, the more clearly you can see. The more you release the need for external validation, the more authentic your connections become. Because now, you're not performing. You're not managing. You're not trying to be seen in a certain way. You're just being. And that presence, that authenticity, is magnetic. It's rare. It's powerful. So this is where we begin. With the recognition that something has to change. That the way you've been navigating the world, the way you've been relating to yourself and others, isn't sustainable. It's draining you. It's dimming your light. And you deserve better. Emotional detachment is not the absence of feeling. It's the presence of choice. It's the ability to feel fully without being destroyed by what you feel. To care deeply without losing yourself in the caring. To engage with life without being consumed by it. And in the chapters ahead, we're going to explore exactly how to do that. We're going to dismantle the mechanisms that keep you trapped. We're going to rebuild your relationship with your emotions, with others, with yourself. We're going to give you tools that actually work. Not platitudes. Not wishful thinking. But real, practical, neurologically sound strategies for reclaiming your inner peace. But for now, just sit with this. Notice what comes up. Notice if there's resistance. Notice if there's relief. Notice if a part of you is saying, yes, this is what I've been looking for. Because that part of you, the part that recognizes the truth when it hears it, that's the part we're going to strengthen. That's the part that already knows the way. You don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to remember who you were before the world taught you to be afraid. Before you learned that your value was conditional. Before you started carrying storms that were never yours to carry. So take a breath. A real one. Let it fill your lungs completely. And as you exhale, imagine releasing just a little bit of that weight. Just a little. Because change doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments like this. In small, deliberate choices. In the decision to step back, to observe, to reclaim your power. This is your journey. And it begins now. Karakter sayisi, yaklaşık 11,500 karakter. Devam ediyorum. But before we move forward, I want you to understand something crucial. Emotional detachment is not a destination. It's not something you achieve once and then you're done. It's a practice. A daily, moment-by-moment choice. Some days will be easier than others. Some situations will trigger you more deeply than you expect. And that's okay. This isn't about perfection. It's about progress. It's about building a new relationship with yourself and the world. And the first step in that process is simply this: awareness. You have to see the patterns before you can change them. You have to notice when you're being pulled into the river before you can choose to step back. And that noticing, that witnessing, is itself a form of detachment. Because in the moment you observe your reaction, you've created space between stimulus and response. And in that space, there is freedom. Think about the last time someone said something that really bothered you. Maybe it was a criticism. Maybe it was a dismissive comment. Maybe it was just a tone of voice. Whatever it was, notice what happened inside you. Did you immediately feel defensive? Did your mind start racing, formulating a response, justifying yourself? Did you feel a tightness in your chest, a heat in your face, a knot in your stomach? That's entanglement. That's what it feels like when you're emotionally fused with the experience. And in that state, you have very few options. You can react. You can suppress. You can ruminate. But you can't respond consciously. You can't choose. Now imagine the same scenario, but with one small difference. Imagine that in the moment you hear those words, you notice your reaction. You don't judge it. You don't try to push it away. You simply observe it. Ah, there's defensiveness. There's tightness. There's the urge to explain. And in that observation, something shifts. The reaction doesn't disappear. But it loses some of its grip. You're no longer completely identified with it. You're witnessing it. And from that witnessing place, you can ask yourself, how do I want to respond? What serves me here? What aligns with who I'm trying to become? This is the power of emotional detachment. It doesn't eliminate difficult emotions. It transforms your relationship with them. And that transformation changes everything. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. This sounds like I'm supposed to become emotionless. Like I'm supposed to stop caring. And I understand that concern. But let me be very clear. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop suffering unnecessarily. It means you stop making other people's issues your own. It means you stop abandoning yourself in an attempt to fix, please, or control others. In fact, true detachment often leads to deeper, more authentic care. Because when you're not drowning in your own reactivity, when you're not desperate for validation, when you're not trying to control outcomes, you can actually see people clearly. You can listen without an agenda. You can offer support without losing yourself. You can love without fear. And that's a different kind of love. It's not the conditional, anxious, needy love that says, I'll care for you as long as you make me feel good about myself. It's the unconditional, grounded, spacious love that says, I see you. I accept you. And I'm here, not because I need something from you, but because I choose to be. But getting to that place requires work. It requires you to look honestly at the ways you've been operating. At the patterns you've been repeating. At the beliefs you've been carrying without question. And that can be uncomfortable. Because it means admitting that some of the strategies you've used to survive, some of the ways you've tried to protect yourself, aren't working anymore. In fact, they might be the very things causing you the most pain. So let's go a little deeper. Let's look at why these patterns exist in the first place. Because nothing you do is random. Every behavior, every reaction, every coping mechanism you have, it all makes sense when you understand the context. And the context, for most of us, is that we grew up in environments where our emotional needs were not consistently met. Where love felt conditional. Where we learned that to be safe, to be valued, we had to perform, to achieve, to be a certain way. Maybe your parents were well-intentioned but overwhelmed. Maybe they were emotionally unavailable. Maybe they were critical or unpredictable. Maybe the message you received, directly or indirectly, was that your feelings were too much, too inconvenient, too difficult to handle. And so you learned to suppress them. Or manage them. Or use them to manipulate outcomes. You learned that your worth was not inherent but contingent on external factors. And here's the devastating part. Once you internalize that belief, you carry it everywhere. You bring it into your relationships. You bring it into your work. You bring it into every interaction. And you're constantly seeking proof that you matter. Constantly scanning for signs of rejection. Constantly trying to earn the love and acceptance that should have been given freely. This is exhausting. And it's unsustainable. Because no amount of external validation will ever fill an internal void. No one else can give you the sense of worth that you refuse to give yourself. And the more you search outside yourself, the more you reinforce the very belief that's causing the problem. So what's the alternative? The alternative is to turn inward. To become the source of your own validation. To learn to observe your thoughts and emotions without being ruled by them. To develop a stable sense of self that doesn't fluctuate based on external circumstances. And that's what the rest of this journey is about. That's what we're building toward. A version of you that is grounded. Present. Free. A version of you that can engage with life fully without being destroyed by it. A version of you that knows, deeply and unshakably, that you are enough. Not because of what you do or achieve or how others perceive you. But simply because you exist. And the first step on that path is right here. Right now. In this moment of recognition. In this willingness to see things as they are, not as you wish they were. In this courage to question the beliefs and patterns that have been running your life. So I'll ask you again. What would it feel like to live without that constant inner storm? What would it be like to wake up in the morning without immediately checking your phone to see if someone responded, if someone liked your post, if someone thought of you? What would it be like to have a difficult conversation and walk away feeling centered, not replaying every word, not wondering if you said the wrong thing? That's possible. Not someday. Not after you fix yourself or become a better person. Right now. Through the practice of emotional detachment. And as we close this first chapter, I want to leave you with this thought. The storm you're carrying, it's not yours. It never was. You picked it up along the way, thinking you had to. Thinking it would keep you safe or make you valuable or help you belong. But it's time to put it down. It's time to step out of the river and onto the bank. It's time to reclaim your peace. In the next chapter, we're going to start building the skills to do exactly that. But for now, just notice. Notice when you're entangled. Notice when you're trying to control. Notice when you're seeking validation. And in that noticing, know that you've already begun. The journey to emotional freedom starts with a single moment of awareness. And you just had it. Chapter 2: The Hidden Costs of Emotional Overattachment. There's a kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. You know the one I'm talking about. It's not physical exhaustion. It's not the fatigue that comes from a long day of work or exercise. It's deeper than that. It's a weariness that lives in your bones, in your mind, in the very center of who you are. You wake up and you're already tired. You go through your day and every interaction feels like it requires more energy than you have. And by the time evening comes, you're not just physically drained. You're emotionally depleted. Spiritually empty. This is emotional exhaustion. And it's one of the most common, most overlooked costs of living in a state of constant emotional overattachment. Most people don't even realize they're experiencing it. They think it's just life. They think everyone feels this way. They think it's normal to be perpetually overwhelmed by the emotional weight of simply existing in the world. But it's not normal. Or rather, it's common, but it's not natural. It's not how you're meant to live. And once you understand what's actually happening, once you see the mechanisms behind this exhaustion, you can begin to change it. So let's talk about what emotional overattachment actually costs you. Not in abstract terms. Not in theory. But in the concrete, lived experience of your daily life. Because these costs are real. They're measurable. And they're taking more from you than you probably realize. The first cost is something I call mental noise. It's that constant stream of thought that never quite stops. The internal commentary that runs in the background of everything you do. And here's what makes it insidious: you've gotten so used to it that you don't even notice it anymore. It's like living next to a highway. At first, the sound of traffic is overwhelming. But after a while, you stop hearing it consciously. It becomes part of the ambient noise of your life. Except it's still there. It's still affecting you. It's still disrupting your peace, even when you're not aware of it. Think about the last time you sent a message to someone important to you. Maybe it was a text to a friend. Maybe it was an email to your boss. Maybe it was a carefully worded response in a group chat. You hit send. And then what happened? If you're like most people, something inside you immediately activated. A part of your awareness split off and began monitoring. Waiting. Watching for the response. And not just passively watching. Actively anticipating. Calculating. Imagining scenarios. You check your phone. Nothing yet. You tell yourself it's fine. They're probably busy. But 5 minutes later, you check again. Still nothing. And now a small tension begins to build. Not huge. Not dramatic. Just a subtle tightness. A slight unease. You start wondering. Did I say something wrong? Was my tone off? Are they upset with me? Did they even see it? And here's where it gets interesting. Because consciously, you might not even be thinking these thoughts. You might be doing something else entirely: working, cooking, watching a show. But underneath, in the background, that monitoring system is still running. That part of your mind is still scanning, still waiting, still anticipating. And it's using energy. Constantly. Relentlessly. This is mental noise. And it's exhausting. Now multiply this by every interaction you have. Every conversation. Every social media post. Every email. Every glance exchanged with a coworker. Every moment where you're not sure if you were understood correctly, if you made the right impression, if you're being judged or evaluated or found lacking. Each one creates its own small thread of mental noise. And by the end of the day, you have dozens, maybe hundreds of these threads running simultaneously. All of them consuming bandwidth. All of them draining your cognitive resources. Your brain, remarkable as it is, was not designed for this. It was designed to focus on one thing at a time, to solve concrete problems, to respond to real threats in the immediate environment. But now you're asking it to simultaneously track and manage multiple social dynamics, interpret ambiguous signals, predict future outcomes, and protect you from imagined rejections. All while pretending to be present in whatever you're actually doing. No wonder you're tired. Let me give you another example. You're in a meeting, or at a family gathering, or just having coffee with someone. And at some point, you notice their expression change. Maybe they frown slightly. Maybe they look away. Maybe their tone shifts just a little. And immediately, your system goes on alert. What did I just say? Did I offend them? Are they losing interest? Do they think I'm boring? Stupid? Too much? And now you're no longer in the conversation. You're in your head. You're analyzing. You're rewinding the last few sentences you spoke, searching for the moment it went wrong. You're watching their face for more clues. You're adjusting your behavior, your words, your energy, trying to course correct, trying to bring them back, trying to regain whatever you think you lost. But here's the thing. You don't actually know what that facial expression meant. You don't know what caused the shift in tone. Maybe they remembered something they forgot to do. Maybe they felt a sudden pain in their back. Maybe they were thinking about something completely unrelated to you. Or maybe, just maybe, they were having their own internal reaction to something, and it had nothing to do with you at all. But you assumed it did. You made it about you. And in doing so, You created a whole cascade of stress and mental activity that didn't need to exist. This is what I mean when I talk about the cost of emotional overattachment. You're constantly interpreting the world through a lens of personal relevance. Everything becomes about you. Every mood shift, every silence, every ambiguous comment gets processed as a potential threat or validation of your worth. And this interpretation requires enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy. Psychologists call this hypermentalizing. It's when you're overly focused on inferring the mental states of others, constantly trying to read their minds, predict their reactions, manage their perceptions. And while some degree of social awareness is healthy and necessary, hypermentalizing takes it to an extreme. You're not just aware. You're hypervigilant. You're scanning for danger in every interaction. And your nervous system is responding accordingly. From a neurological perspective, what's happening is fascinating and tragic at the same time. Your amygdala, that almond-shaped cluster of neurons responsible for processing emotions and detecting threats, is constantly activated. It's receiving signals that something might be wrong, that you might be in social danger, that your status or belonging is being threatened. And so it keeps you in a state of mild but persistent stress. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking and decision-making, is being hijacked by this constant threat detection. Instead of being available for creative thinking, problem-solving, or simply being present, it's busy trying to manage the social threats your amygdala keeps flagging. And the more this happens, the more it becomes your default mode. You're literally training your brain to be anxious, to be vigilant, to be exhausted. And the cost doesn't stop at mental exhaustion. It seeps into every area of your life. Your personal boundaries begin to erode. Because when you're emotionally overattached, when you're constantly monitoring and managing the emotional states of others, you lose track of where you end and they begin. You start taking responsibility for things that aren't yours to carry. Someone is upset? You feel like you need to fix it. Someone is disappointed? You feel like you failed them. Someone is distant? You feel like you did something wrong. But here's the reality. Other people's emotions are their own. Their reactions, their moods, their internal states, these belong to them. They're shaped by their history, their beliefs, their current circumstances, their neurochemistry, their sleep patterns, their stress levels. And while your actions might trigger something in them, you are not responsible for how they process and respond to that trigger. Let me say that again, because it's crucial. You are not responsible for other people's emotional reactions. But when you're emotionally overattached, you believe you are. And so you contort yourself. You edit your words. You suppress your needs. You minimize your truth. All in an attempt to manage outcomes you cannot control. And in the process, you lose yourself. Your boundaries dissolve. You become a chameleon, constantly adapting, constantly shifting, never quite sure who you actually are because you're always being whoever you think others need you to be. This is exhausting in a different way. It's not just cognitive exhaustion. It's existential exhaustion. It's the weariness that comes from living outside of yourself, from spending your days in service of an impossible task, making everyone around you comfortable while abandoning your own comfort entirely. And the cruelest part? It doesn't even work. People can sense when you're not being authentic. They can feel when you're performing. And ironically, the very thing you're doing to gain connection and approval often creates distance and mistrust. Because people don't connect with performances. They connect with presence. With authenticity. With someone who is grounded enough in themselves that they don't need to constantly adjust and accommodate. Now, let's talk about something even more subtle. The constant state of being triggered. When you're emotionally overattached, your trigger threshold is incredibly low. Small things feel big. Neutral comments feel loaded. Everyday interactions feel fraught with potential danger. Someone doesn't laugh at your joke? Trigger. Someone takes longer than usual to respond to your text? Trigger. Someone seems distracted during your conversation? Trigger. Each one sends a little jolt through your system. Each one activates that stress response. Each one requires emotional processing and regulation. And over time, you start to feel like you're living in a minefield. You never know what's going to set you off. You never feel safe. You never feel at ease. You're constantly bracing for impact, waiting for the next thing that will hurt, the next sign that you're not enough, the next piece of evidence that you're failing at this impossible task of being acceptable to everyone. This is not a way to live. This is survival mode. And when you're in survival mode chronically, your body pays a price. Your cortisol levels remain elevated. Your immune system is suppressed. Your digestion is impaired. Your sleep is disrupted. You're literally making yourself sick with this constant vigilance. And for what? For the illusion of control? For the hope that if you just monitor carefully enough, adjust skillfully enough, you can prevent rejection or criticism or disappointment? But you can't. You never could. The only thing you're actually preventing is your own peace. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're holding a dozen glass balls. Each one represents a different relationship, a different social obligation, a different area where you're trying to maintain control and manage outcomes. You're juggling them all, desperately trying not to drop any. And you're terrified. Because you believe that if you drop even one, everything will shatter. But here's what you don't realize. Most of those balls aren't even yours to hold. Someone handed them to you, or you picked them up out of fear or obligation or the belief that you had to. And you've been carrying them so long that you've forgotten they're not yours. You've forgotten that you can put them down. And some of those balls? They're not even glass. They're rubber. They'll bounce. They're not as fragile as you think. But you're treating everything as if it's on the verge of breaking, as if one wrong move will destroy it all. And that belief, that fear, is what's actually breaking you. So what's the alternative? What does it look like to stop living this way? It starts with recognition. With seeing these patterns clearly. With admitting to yourself that yes, this is what you've been doing. Yes, this is costing you. Yes, there is another way. It means noticing when you check your phone for the 10th time, waiting for a response that hasn't come. And instead of spiraling into anxiety, instead of creating stories about what it means, you pause. You feel the urge without acting on it. You recognize it for what it is, a habit. A pattern. A learned response that no longer serves you. It means catching yourself when you're replaying a conversation, analyzing every word, looking for what you did wrong. And instead of continuing down that path, you gently redirect. You remind yourself that you cannot read minds. That people are complex. That their reactions are influenced by 1,000 factors you can't see. And that your worth is not determined by whether someone responded the way you hoped they would. It means becoming aware of the stories you tell yourself. The narratives you create about what people think, what they feel, what they mean. Because most of the time, those stories are fiction. They're your anxiety speaking. They're your old wounds projecting into the present. They're not truth. And here's something powerful. The moment you recognize a pattern, you've already created space around it. The moment you witness yourself in the act of overattachment, you're no longer completely identified with it. You're observing it. And that observation is itself a form of freedom. This doesn't mean the patterns disappear immediately. They won't. You've been practicing them for years, maybe decades. They're deeply grooved into your neural pathways. But with awareness, with consistent practice, those grooves can be rewired. New pathways can be created. New responses can be learned. And gradually, imperceptibly at first, things begin to shift. The mental noise quiets. The constant vigilance relaxes. The triggers lose their power. You start to feel like you have more space inside. More room to breathe. More energy for things that actually matter. You start to notice that when someone doesn't respond right away, you don't immediately spiral. You might notice the urge to check your phone, but you don't have to obey it. You might feel a flicker of anxiety, but it doesn't consume you. You can acknowledge it and let it pass. You start to realize that other people's moods and reactions are not your responsibility to fix or manage. That you can care about someone without taking on their emotions as your own. That you can be present and supportive without losing yourself in the process. You start to reclaim your boundaries. Not aggressively. Not defensively. But clearly. You begin to understand that saying no is not a betrayal. That prioritizing your own needs is not selfish. That you are allowed to take up space, to have preferences, to exist without constantly apologizing for it. And perhaps most importantly, you start to feel like yourself again. Not the version of yourself that's been shaped and molded by years of trying to please, to accommodate, to avoid rejection. But the original you. The one who existed before you learned that love was conditional. Before you started believing that your worth needed to be earned. That version of you is still there. Waiting. And emotional detachment is how you find your way back. But I want to be honest with you. This journey is not always comfortable. Because once you start seeing these patterns, once you become aware of how much energy you've been giving away, how many boundaries you've let dissolve, how much of your life has been spent in service of impossible standards, there's often grief. There's anger. There's a sense of loss for all the time and energy that was wasted. And that's okay. That's part of the process. You're allowed to feel those feelings. You're allowed to grieve. But don't let those feelings stop you. Don't let them pull you back into the old patterns. Instead, let them fuel your commitment to change. Let them remind you why this work matters. Because on the other side of this discomfort is something extraordinary. It's a life where you're not constantly exhausted by the effort of existing. Where you can have conversations without replaying them afterward. Where you can send a message and then forget about it until a response comes. Where other people's moods don't determine your state of being. Where you feel solid in yourself, regardless of external circumstances. That's not a fantasy. That's not some unreachable ideal. That's what becomes possible when you stop paying the hidden costs of emotional overattachment. When you stop letting the world drain you. When you start protecting your energy, your peace, your sense of self. So I want you to ask yourself something. Right now. What is this costing you? Not theoretically. Not generally. But specifically, in your life, today. What are you giving away? What patterns are you repeating? What boundaries have you let erode? And more importantly, are you ready to stop? Are you ready to reclaim what's yours? Are you ready to step out of survival mode and into something freer, something lighter, something more aligned with who you actually are? Because the moment you decide you're ready, everything changes. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But genuinely. The path forward becomes visible. The work becomes possible. And the life you've been longing for, the one where you're not constantly drowning in mental noise and emotional exhaustion, that life begins to emerge. You don't have to carry all of this anymore. You never did. And in the next chapter, we're going to start building the specific practices that will help you put it down. But for now, just let yourself see it. Let yourself feel the weight of what you've been carrying. And know that acknowledging it is the first step toward releasing it. The hidden costs of emotional overattachment are real. But they're not permanent. And you're not powerless. You're here. You're aware. You're ready. And that's exactly where transformation begins. Chapter 3, The Science of Emotional Detachment. Why does this work so powerfully? There is a moment that arrives without announcement. A comment is made. A glance is thrown. A message appears on your screen. And suddenly, without your permission, your chest tightens. Your thoughts begin to spiral. Your hands clench. The world around you fades, and all that remains is the feeling, the interpretation, the story you tell yourself about what just happened. This is not weakness. This is not failure. This is simply the human brain doing what it was designed to do: protect you. But here is the paradox we must sit with, the truth we must let settle into our bones: the very mechanism designed to keep you safe can become the source of your greatest suffering. So let us ask, what if you could witness that moment without being consumed by it? What if you could feel without drowning? What if you could observe the storm without becoming the storm itself? This is the essence of emotional detachment. And to understand why it works, why it holds such transformative power, we must first descend into the architecture of your brain, into the ancient chambers where emotion is born. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a room deep within your skull, a small, almond-shaped structure nestled in the limbic system. This is your amygdala. Think of it as the body's alarm system, a sentinel that never sleeps, constantly scanning your environment for signs of threat. It does not think. It does not reason. It simply reacts. When someone raises their voice, when you receive criticism, when you sense rejection, your amygdala lights up like a flare in the darkness. It does not ask whether the threat is real or imagined. It does not pause to consider context or intention. It simply sounds the alarm: danger, danger, danger. And your body listens. Cortisol floods your bloodstream. Your heart rate accelerates. Your muscles tense. Your breathing shallows. Your pupils dilate. Your digestive system slows. Every non-essential function shuts down because your body believes, truly believes, that you are under attack. This is the neurobiological foundation of emotional overreaction, the biological cascade that transforms a neutral event into a personal catastrophe. But here is what makes this process so insidious, so difficult to escape. Your amygdala does not only respond to what is happening now. It responds to echoes, to shadows, to the unhealed wounds of your past. Let me offer you an image. Imagine you are walking through a forest, and you step on a branch. It snaps beneath your foot. A sharp, sudden sound. And in that instant, your body freezes. Your pulse quickens. Why? Because years ago, in another forest, that same sound preceded something painful. A fall. A scare. A moment of danger. Your brain has learned. It has encoded that memory, filed it away in the archives of your nervous system. And now, every time you hear that sound, your body does not respond to the branch. It responds to the memory. To the fear that was registered long ago. This is how past experiences become present triggers. This is why a simple disagreement with a colleague can feel like abandonment. Why a partner's momentary distance can feel like betrayal. Why a constructive critique can feel like annihilation. Your amygdala is not reacting to the present moment. It is reacting to every moment that came before it. Every rejection. Every wound. Every time you were made to feel small, invisible, unworthy. Think about this for a moment. Really consider it. How many of your reactions today are actually about today? How many times have you felt a disproportionate surge of emotion and, later, when the dust settled, realized that the intensity had little to do with what actually happened? A friend cancels plans, and you feel devastated. Not because of this cancellation, but because of all the times you felt forgotten as a child. A colleague questions your work, and you feel attacked. Not because the feedback was harsh, but because criticism has always felt like proof of your inadequacy. Your present is haunted by your past. And until you understand this, until you see the invisible threads connecting your reactions to your history, you will remain a prisoner of patterns you did not consciously choose. And here is the cruel irony: the more you react, the more you reinforce the pattern. Each time you spiral, each time you lose yourself in the emotion, you strengthen the neural pathway. You teach your brain that this is how you respond. This is who you are. Neuroscience calls this Hebbian learning. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Every time you follow the same emotional script, you carve that script deeper into your brain. You make it easier to fall into, harder to climb out of. Imagine a path through a meadow. The first time someone walks it, the grass barely bends. But after 100 people have walked it, after 1,000, the path becomes worn, clear, inevitable. This is what happens in your brain. Your reactions become highways. And highways are hard to abandon. But you are not your reactions. You are not your amygdala. You are not the accumulated patterns of your past. You are the awareness that can witness all of this. You are the consciousness that can choose differently. So now we arrive at the mechanism, the sacred alchemy of emotional detachment. And it begins with a single, revolutionary act: separation. Not suppression. Not denial. Not the cold, rigid distance of someone who is shut down, who has built walls so high that nothing can touch them. That is not detachment. That is dissociation. That is the wounded response of a heart that has been broken too many times. No. What we are speaking of is a spacious, conscious separation. A gap between stimulus and response. A pause between what happens to you and what you do with what happens to you. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the concentration camps of Nazi Germany, who witnessed humanity at its worst and still found meaning, once wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." That space. That pause. That breath between what happens and how you react. This is where detachment lives. This is where transformation becomes possible. Let me guide you through the mechanics, through the precise choreography of this inner shift. When something triggers you, when that familiar heat rises in your chest, your first instinct is to merge with it. To identify with it. To say, "I am angry. I am hurt. I am afraid." Notice the language. I am. Not I feel, but I am. You have collapsed your entire identity into the emotion. You have become the anger. You have become the hurt. You have become the fear. But what if, instead, you took a single step back? What if you changed the language, shifted the frame, and said, "There is anger here. There is hurt here. There is fear here"? Do you feel the difference? It is subtle, but it is everything. In the first statement, you are the emotion. In the second, you are the observer of the emotion. You are the sky, and the emotion is weather passing through. This is not semantic trickery. This is not playing games with words. This is neurological rewiring. Because when you observe rather than merge, when you notice rather than become, you activate a different part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. The seat of executive function. The home of reason, perspective, and conscious choice. Think of your mind as a house. The amygdala is the smoke alarm, loud and insistent, wired to detect the slightest hint of danger. It screams when it senses smoke. But the prefrontal cortex is you, standing in the hallway, evaluating the situation with calm clarity. Is there a fire? Or is it just steam from the shower? Do I need to run, or can I simply open a window? Detachment allows you to access this higher function. It allows you to pause, to assess, to ask, is this true? Is this proportional? Is this mine to carry? Is this about now, or is this about then? And here is where the real magic unfolds, the moment where everything changes. Because when you stop merging with the emotion, when you stop claiming it as your identity, something profound happens, the emotion begins to lose its grip. Emotions, by their very nature, are transient. They are waves, not walls. They rise, they peak, they fall. But only if you allow them to move through you. Only if you do not cling to them, feed them, build a home for them in your chest. There is a meditation practice in Buddhism called noting. When a thought or feeling arises, you simply note it. Thinking. Feeling. Judging. Remembering. You do not analyze it. You do not fight it. You do not try to change it or understand it or make it go away. You simply name it, acknowledge it, and let it pass. This is the essence of emotional detachment. To see without grasping. To feel without identifying. To witness without claiming ownership. Let me give you a practical image, something tactile, something you can return to again and again when the waves rise. Imagine you are standing on the shore of a vast ocean. The waves are emotions. They roll toward you, some gentle, some violent, some towering and terrible. You can do one of two things. You can dive into the wave. Let it pull you under. Let it toss you, spin you, disorient you. Let it drag you out to sea where you lose all sense of direction, all sense of self. Or you can stand on the shore and watch. You can feel the spray on your face. You can hear the roar. You can acknowledge the power of the wave, the beauty of it, the danger of it. But you do not have to enter it. This is detachment. This is the choice you always have, even when it does not feel like a choice. Even when the wave is crashing and your instinct is to dive, you can choose to stand. You can choose to witness. Now, I know what you might be thinking. I can hear the question forming in your mind, but isn't this cold? Isn't this disconnected? Don't I need to feel my feelings to process them? Haven't we been told that suppressing emotions is unhealthy? And the answer is yes. And no. Because there is a profound difference between feeling your feelings and becoming your feelings. There is a world of difference between suppression and observation. Emotional detachment is not emotional suppression. It is not numbness. It is not the walls you build when you have been hurt too many times, when you have decided that feeling is too dangerous, too painful, too costly. It is not the armor you wear to keep the world out. It is the opposite. It is the willingness to feel fully, deeply, authentically, without losing yourself in the process. It is the capacity to hold space for your emotions without being consumed by them. It is the maturity to say, "This is happening. I see it. I feel it. And I am still here. I am still whole. I am still capable of choice." Think of it this way: when you are caught in the current of an emotion, when you are swept away by the undertow, you cannot see its shape. You cannot understand its origin. You cannot make a conscious choice about how to respond. You are simply reacting, flailing, trying to survive. But when you step back, when you create that sacred space between you and the feeling, you can see it clearly. You can examine it. You can turn it over in your hands like a stone and ask, "Where is this coming from? What does this remind me of? What is this trying to tell me? What does this emotion want me to know?" This is emotional intelligence. This is maturity. This is the difference between being ruled by your inner world and being guided by it. The difference between being a leaf in the wind and being the tree that bends but does not break. And here is the neuroscience behind it, the biological proof that this is not just philosophy, not just spiritual bypassing, but a concrete, measurable shift in how your brain operates. When you practice detachment, when you observe without merging, you are literally rewiring your brain. You are weakening the connection between trigger and reaction. You are creating new pathways, new possibilities, new ways of being. Studies in neuroplasticity have shown that the brain is not fixed. It is not set in stone at age 25, doomed to repeat the same patterns forever. It is fluid, adaptable, constantly reshaping itself based on what you practice, what you reinforce, what you give your attention to. If you practice reactivity, if you indulge every emotional impulse, if you let yourself be swept away again and again, you will become more reactive. The pathways will deepen. The patterns will solidify. You will become someone who cannot help but overreact, someone who is always at the mercy of their feelings. But if you practice pause, if you practice observation, if you practice the sacred art of witnessing without becoming, you will become more grounded, more stable, more capable of choosing your response rather than being chosen by your conditioning. Every time you choose detachment, you are casting a vote for the person you want to become. You are training your nervous system to respond differently. You are teaching your brain that not every alarm requires evacuation. That not every trigger demands reaction. That you can feel the feeling and still choose your behavior. But let us not pretend this is easy. Let us not romanticize the difficulty or minimize the challenge. Because in the moment of trigger, when your heart is racing and your mind is spinning and every fiber of your being is screaming at you to react, detachment can feel impossible. It can feel like you are being asked to suppress, to deny, to betray your own experience. It can feel like you are being told that your feelings are wrong, that your pain is invalid, that you should just get over it. But that is not what we are saying. That is not what this is about. So let me offer you a mantra, a guiding principle, a North Star that you can carry with you into the storm. Feel, but do not drown. See, but do not carry. Feel the anger. Let it rise. Let it move through your body. But do not let it define you. Do not let it become your identity. Do not let it dictate your every word and action. See the hurt. Acknowledge the wound. Honor the pain of it. But do not let it consume you. Do not let it become the lens through which you see everything. Do not let it convince you that you are nothing but wounded, nothing but broken. Acknowledge the fear. Give it space. Let it speak. But do not let it dictate your choices. Do not let it keep you small. Do not let it rob you of your agency, your power, your capacity to move forward. This is the minimalist wisdom at the heart of detachment. It is not about doing more. It is about releasing more. It is not about control, about gripping tighter, about forcing yourself to feel or not feel a certain way. It is about surrender. Not to the emotion, but to the truth that you are larger than any single emotion. You are not your anger. You are the one who can witness anger. You are not your fear. You are the one who can hold space for fear. You are not your pain. You are the one who can carry pain without being crushed by it. And when you practice this, when you return to this again and again, when you make it a daily discipline, a sacred ritual, something begins to shift. The triggers that once controlled you begin to lose their power. The stories you told yourself begin to dissolve. The version of yourself that was always on the defensive, always bracing for impact, always waiting for the next blow, begins to soften. You begin to move through the world differently. Not hardened. Not detached in the cold sense, not removed or aloof or above it all. But present. Aware. Grounded. Responsive rather than reactive. You become someone who can hold space for others because you have learned to hold space for yourself. You become someone who can listen without defending, who can disagree without attacking, who can be hurt without retaliating. You become someone who can love without losing yourself. Who can give without depleting yourself? Who can stay open without being destroyed? And here is the final, most beautiful truth, the gift that waits at the end of this practice. Emotional detachment is not about becoming less human. It is about becoming more fully human. It is about reclaiming your capacity to choose. To feel without being owned. To engage without being consumed. To love without losing yourself. It is about stepping into the fullness of who you were always meant to be. Not a reactor. Not a victim of your own nervous system. But a conscious being. A person who can witness their inner world with compassion and clarity. A person who can respond to life rather than simply reacting to it. So as we close this chapter, I want you to sit with a question. A question that has no easy answer, but one that will guide you forward, one that will illuminate the path ahead. What would change in your life if you could witness your emotions without becoming them? Sit with that. Let it breathe. Let it expand in your chest. What relationships would heal? What conversations would you finally be able to have? What boundaries would you set? What dreams would you pursue? What decisions would you make differently if you were not ruled by fear, by the echoes of old wounds, by the patterns inherited from your past? What version of yourself would emerge if you were no longer a prisoner of your reactions? If you were free to choose, moment by moment, how you want to show up in the world, let that question sit with you. Let it guide you into the next chapter, where we will explore how to practice this in the real, messy, complicated terrain of daily life. Because knowing the science is one thing, living it is another. And that is where we are going next. Chapter 4: 5 Deep Detachment Techniques You Can Practice Today. Knowledge without practice is like a map without movement. You can study the terrain, memorize every route, understand every contour. But until you take the first step, until you place your foot on the path, the map remains theoretical. Beautiful, perhaps. Useful, maybe. But not transformative. So now we move from understanding to embodiment. From theory to practice. From knowing why detachment works to learning how to live it, how to breathe it into your daily existence, how to make it as natural as the rhythm of your heartbeat. What follows are 5 techniques. 5 doorways. 5 invitations to step into a different way of being. They are simple, but do not mistake simplicity for easiness. They are accessible, but they require commitment. They are portable, meaning you can carry them anywhere, but they demand presence. Think of these techniques as tools in a kit. You would not use a hammer for every task. You would not use a screwdriver to cut wood. Each tool has its purpose, its moment, its proper application. And so it is with these practices. Some will resonate immediately. Some will feel awkward at first. Some will become your go-to refuge in moments of storm. Let us begin. Technique 1: Mental distance, observing from 3 meters away. Imagine, for a moment, that you are watching a film. On the screen, 2 people are arguing. Their voices rise. Their faces redden. The tension is palpable, thick enough to cut. But you, sitting in your seat, remain calm. You observe. You might feel empathy. You might feel curiosity. But you do not feel personally attacked. You do not feel the need to defend yourself. Because it is not happening to you. It is happening to them, on the screen, in a story separate from your own. This is the essence of mental distance. The ability to observe your life as though you are watching it unfold from a slight remove. Not so far that you become disconnected, not so far that you lose touch with your humanity, but just far enough that you can see clearly. 3 meters. Approximately 10 feet. Close enough to see the details, far enough to maintain perspective. The next time someone criticizes you, the next time you feel that familiar surge of defensiveness, try this. Imagine yourself floating 3 meters above the scene. You can still hear the words. You can still see the expressions. But you are no longer inside the moment. You are beside it. Above it. Witnessing it. From this vantage point, ask yourself, what is actually happening here? Not what does this mean about me, not what am I going to say back, but what is actually, objectively occurring. A person is speaking words. You are hearing those words. Your body is reacting. Your mind is interpreting. But from 3 meters away, you can see all of this as a process, as a mechanical unfolding, rather than as a personal assault. Let me give you a concrete example. You are in a meeting. Your manager says, this report is not up to standard. It needs significant revision. Immediately, your amygdala fires. Your chest tightens. The internal narrative begins, they think I am incompetent. I am going to lose my job. I always mess things up. But now, imagine stepping 3 meters back. Imagine watching this scene as though you are a fly on the wall, a silent observer taking notes. What do you see? You see a manager giving feedback on a document. You see a person receiving that feedback. You see a body responding with tension. You see a mind creating a story. But from this distance, you can also see what is not there. You do not see anyone saying, you are worthless. You do not see anyone attacking your character. You see a transaction, a moment, a piece of information being exchanged. This distance does not make you cold. It makes you clear. It allows you to respond rather than react. It allows you to say, "Thank you for the feedback. Can you point me to the specific sections that need work," instead of spiraling into shame or lashing out in defense? Practice this daily. When you feel triggered, when the heat rises, take a breath and imagine yourself floating 3 meters up. Watch the scene unfold. Notice what is actually happening versus what your mind is making it mean. Over time, this becomes instinctive. Over time, you will find that you can access this perspective in real time, in the middle of the storm, not just in reflection afterward. Technique 2: Naming the emotion, the power of precise language. There is a practice in psychology called affect labeling. It sounds technical, clinical even, but the concept is beautifully simple. When you name an emotion, you reduce its intensity. This is not folk wisdom. This is neuroscience. Studies using functional MRI scans have shown that when you verbally label an emotion, the amygdala, that alarm bell in your brain, actually calms down. The act of naming creates distance. It engages the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, and dampens the limbic system, the feeling brain. But here is the crucial detail: the language must be precise. It must be honest. It must cut through the fog and name exactly what is present. Not "I feel bad." Not "I am upset." But "I am feeling shame right now. I am feeling the hot flush of embarrassment spreading across my chest. I am feeling the tightness of anxiety in my throat." Do you see the difference? The first statements are vague, diffuse, unhelpful. They give your brain nothing to work with. But the second set of statements, they are specific. They are embodied. They are true. When you name an emotion with precision, you take away its power to control you. You transform it from a vague, overwhelming cloud into a discrete, manageable experience. Let me walk you through this. You are scrolling through social media. You see a friend's post about their promotion, their new house, their perfect vacation. And something twists in your stomach. Your jaw clenches. You feel, what? Bad? No. Be specific. I am feeling envy. I am feeling the sharp sting of comparison. I am feeling inadequate, as though their success highlights my lack. I am feeling left behind. Notice what happens when you name it this way. The emotion does not disappear. But it shifts. It becomes something you can hold, something you can examine, rather than something that holds and examines you. And once you have named it, you can choose what to do with it. You can ask, is this envy useful? Does it point me towards something I want? Or is it simply old programming, the belief that there is not enough success to go around, that someone else's gain is my loss? The practice is simple. Throughout your day, whenever an emotion arises, pause and name it. Out loud if you can, silently if you must. I am feeling triggered right now. I am feeling defensive. I am feeling a wave of sadness. I am feeling anger building in my shoulders. Be a scientist of your inner world. Be curious. Be specific. And watch what happens to the intensity of the emotion when you bring language to it, when you shine the light of awareness onto it. Technique 3: Trigger mapping, knowing your emotional landscape. If you do not know your triggers, you will be ambushed by them. Again and again. You will find yourself reacting in ways that surprise you, that shame you, that you cannot seem to control. But what if you could anticipate them? What if you could see them coming, recognize their shape, and prepare yourself before they strike? This is the purpose of trigger mapping. To chart the territory of your emotional reactivity. To understand, with clear-eyed honesty, what sets you off and why. Take out a piece of paper. Or open a note on your phone. And begin to list the situations, the phrases, the behaviors that consistently trigger you. Not the big, obvious ones. The subtle ones. The ones that catch you off guard. Is it when someone interrupts you? When someone questions your competence? When someone is late? When someone does not respond to your message quickly enough? When someone raises their voice? When someone withdraws and becomes silent? Write them down. All of them. Do not judge them. Do not rationalize them. Simply observe and record. Now, next to each trigger, ask yourself, what does this remind me of? When was the first time I felt this way? Because here is the truth. Most of your triggers are not about the present moment. They are about the past. They are about the time your voice was not heard. The time your efforts were dismissed. The time you were abandoned. The time you were criticized until you learned to fear any form of feedback. Let me give you an example from my own life. For years, I would feel a surge of anger whenever someone canceled plans with me. It felt disproportionate. It felt irrational. But I could not stop it. So I sat down and mapped it. I asked, what does this remind me of? And the answer came, slowly, reluctantly. It reminded me of my father, who would promise to take me places and then, at the last minute, find an excuse not to go. It reminded me of feeling unimportant, of feeling like everyone else's time was more valuable than mine. Once I saw this, once I understood that my anger was not really about my friend canceling coffee, but about a 10-year-old child who felt forgotten, the anger softened. It did not disappear. But it became something I could work with, something I could hold with compassion rather than shame. This is the power of trigger mapping. It allows you to see the invisible threads. It allows you to trace your reactions back to their source. And once you understand the source, you can begin to heal it. So map your triggers. Know them. Name them. Understand them. And then, when they arise, you will not be caught off guard. You will recognize them. You will say, ah, there you are. I know you. I know where you come from. And I can choose how to respond. Technique 4, the sacred pause, 3 seconds of conscious silence. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. We have spoken of this. But how do you access that space? How do you create it when everything in you is screaming to react immediately? The answer is both simple and profound. You pause. For 3 seconds. Just 3. It sounds insignificant. 3 seconds is barely a breath. But in those 3 seconds, everything can change. Because in those 3 seconds, you interrupt the automatic reaction. You create a gap in the machinery. You give your prefrontal cortex time to come online, to engage, to offer you a choice. Here is how you practice it. The next time you feel triggered, the next time someone says something that makes your blood boil, before you speak, before you type, before you react, count silently to 3. 1. Breathe in. 2. Breathe out. 3. Choose. In that first second, notice the impulse. Feel the heat, the tension, the urge to defend or attack. Do not judge it. Simply notice it. In the second, remind yourself, I have a choice. I am not my reaction. I can respond differently. In the third, ask, what do I actually want here? What is the outcome I am seeking? What version of myself do I want to be in this moment? And then speak. Act. Respond. But from a place of choice rather than compulsion. Let me be clear, this is not about suppressing your truth. It is not about swallowing your words or pretending everything is fine. It is about ensuring that when you do speak, you are speaking from your highest self rather than your wounded self. There is a story I love about a Zen master who was insulted by a student. The student hurled accusations, criticisms, harsh words. And the master simply stood there, silent, breathing. After a long pause, the student asked, "Why do you not defend yourself?" And the master replied, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The pause is your power. It is the space where you decide what to accept and what to let pass. It is the moment where you reclaim your agency. Practice this everywhere. In traffic when someone cuts you off. In meetings when someone dismisses your idea. In relationships when your partner says something that stings. Pause. Breathe. Count to 3. And then choose. Over time, this pause will become automatic. You will find that you no longer need to count. The gap will simply be there, a natural part of how you move through the world. Technique 5, Energy Gates, choosing who enters your inner world. Your mind is not a public space. Your inner world is not a town square where anyone can wander in and set up shop. It is a sanctuary. A temple. A place that should be protected, curated, honored. And yet, how many people do you allow into that space without permission? How many voices do you carry with you, rent-free, taking up residence in your thoughts? The person who criticized you 3 years ago. The friend who betrayed you. The stranger on the internet who left a cruel comment. The colleague who undermined you. They are all there, in your mind, speaking, judging, occupying precious real estate. This technique is about reclaiming that space. It is about installing gates, boundaries, filters. It is about consciously choosing who and what you allow into your inner world. Imagine your mind has a door. A threshold. And at that threshold stands a gatekeeper. That gatekeeper is you. The aware, conscious, sovereign you. When someone speaks to you, when someone offers their opinion, their judgment, their energy, the gatekeeper asks, does this person have earned access to my inner world? Have they demonstrated wisdom, compassion, genuine care for my well-being? If yes, the gate opens. You consider their words. You let them in. You give them weight. If no, the gate remains closed. You hear the words, but you do not internalize them. You do not give them power. You do not allow them to take root. This is not about arrogance. It is not about dismissing all feedback or surrounding yourself with yes men. It is about discernment. It is about recognizing that not all voices deserve equal weight in your life. The random person on social media who knows nothing about you? They do not get access. The family member who has spent years projecting their insecurities onto you? They do not get access. The colleague who speaks from jealousy rather than genuine concern? They do not get access. But the mentor who has walked the path before you? The friend who has proven their loyalty and wisdom? The therapist who holds space for your growth? They get access. Their words are considered. Their feedback is valued. Let me give you a practical example. You post something online. A stranger comments, "This is stupid." You clearly do not know what you are talking about. Your first instinct is to feel hurt, to defend yourself, to engage. But the gatekeeper asks, who is this person? Have they demonstrated expertise? Do they care about my growth? Do they even know me? No. No. And no. So the gate stays closed. You read the comment. You acknowledge it exists. But you do not let it in. You do not carry it with you. You do not give it space in your inner sanctuary. This practice requires vigilance. It requires awareness. Because the default setting of the human mind is to accept all input as equally valid, to give everyone a seat at the table of your self-perception. But you can change that default. You can become the gatekeeper. You can decide, consciously and deliberately, who gets to influence you, who gets to shape your sense of self, who gets to occupy space in your precious, limited inner world. So ask yourself, who are you currently giving free access to? Whose voices are you carrying? And do they deserve to be there? Make a list. Write down the names. And then, with compassion but firmness, begin to close some gates. Begin to reclaim your inner space. Begin to protect your peace. Integration, bringing it all together. These 5 techniques are not separate islands. They are connected pathways, different entries into the same destination, emotional sovereignty. The ability to feel fully while choosing consciously. The capacity to be touched by life without being destroyed by it. You will not master them overnight. You will not practice them perfectly. There will be days when you forget, when you react before you pause, when you let the wrong voices in. And that is okay. That is human. That is the path. The practice is not about perfection. It is about return. About coming back, again and again, to awareness. To choice. To the person you are becoming. So start small. Choose one technique. Practice it for a week. Notice what shifts. Notice what opens. And then add another. And another. Until these practices become not something you do, but something you are. Until detachment is not a technique but a way of being. Until you move through the world with the calm clarity of someone who knows themselves, who honors their inner world, who responds to life rather than being tossed by it. This is the path. This is the practice. This is the invitation. Will you accept it? Chapter 5, True Inner Peace, you gain it not by losing, but by letting go of the excess. Let me tell you something that might surprise you. Inner peace is not something you find. It's not hidden somewhere waiting for you to discover it. It's not at the end of a long journey, behind some locked door that requires the perfect key. Inner peace is not a destination at all. It's what remains when you stop carrying what was never yours to carry. Think about that for a moment. Really let it land. Because this changes everything. It means you're not broken. It means you're not missing some essential piece. It means you don't need to become someone different or achieve some extraordinary state of enlightenment. You simply need to put down the weight you've been holding. The weight you picked up somewhere along the way, thinking you had to. Thinking it made you responsible, or caring, or good. But it didn't. It just made you tired. So let's talk about what emotional detachment actually gives you. Because I know there's still a part of you that's afraid. Afraid that if you let go, if you stop caring so much, if you stop monitoring and managing and controlling, something terrible will happen. You'll become cold. You'll become isolated. You'll lose the people you love. You'll lose your capacity to feel, to connect, to be human. But that fear is based on a misunderstanding. A fundamental confusion about what it means to be emotionally detached. So let me be absolutely clear. Emotional detachment does not make you heartless. It makes you free. It doesn't eliminate your capacity to feel. It eliminates your suffering over what you feel. It doesn't disconnect you from others. It disconnects you from the desperate need for others to validate your existence. It doesn't make you care less. It makes you care more effectively, more sustainably, more authentically. Because here's what happens when you're emotionally overattached. Your care becomes contaminated. It's not pure care anymore. It's care mixed with need. With fear. With the hope that if you care enough, sacrifice enough, adjust enough, you'll finally be safe. You'll finally be loved. You'll finally be enough. But that's not care. That's bargaining. That's transaction. That's survival. Real care, the kind that actually nourishes both you and the people in your life, comes from a place of fullness, not emptiness. It comes from overflow, not desperation. And you can only care from that place when you're grounded in yourself. When you're not constantly seeking external validation. When you're not terrified of rejection or abandonment. Emotional detachment gives you that ground. It gives you a stable center from which to engage with the world. And from that center, everything changes. Imagine waking up in the morning and not immediately reaching for your phone to check if someone responded, if someone liked your post, if someone thought of you. Imagine the first moments of your day being yours. Just yours. Not spent scanning for proof that you matter, but simply being. Breathing. Existing without needing external confirmation that your existence is acceptable. What would that feel like? Imagine having a difficult conversation and walking away from it feeling centered. Not replaying every word. Not dissecting every pause. Not creating elaborate stories about what the other person really meant or what they're going to think of you now. Just letting the conversation be what it was. Knowing you showed up as honestly as you could. And trusting that whatever happens next will unfold as it needs to. What would that spaciousness feel like? Imagine someone being upset with you, and instead of immediately collapsing into guilt or defensiveness, instead of making their emotion your emergency, you could simply witness it. You could acknowledge their experience without taking it on as your own. You could offer support if appropriate, or create space if that's what's needed, but you wouldn't lose yourself in the process. You wouldn't abandon your own reality to manage theirs. What would that stability feel like? This is what emotional detachment offers. Not coldness. Not indifference. But sovereignty. The ability to remain yourself, regardless of what's swirling around you. The ability to engage fully without being consumed. The ability to love without fear. And I want to be clear about something. This doesn't mean you won't feel pain. You will. Life is inherently painful at times. People you love will hurt you, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. You will experience loss, disappointment, rejection, failure. These are unavoidable aspects of being human. But there's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is what happens when life doesn't meet your expectations. Suffering is what happens when you resist that pain, when you make it mean something about your worth, when you let it define your entire reality. Emotional detachment doesn't eliminate pain. It eliminates unnecessary suffering. It allows you to feel the pain of a moment without turning it into a story about your fundamental inadequacy. It lets you grieve without drowning. It lets you hurt without breaking. And from that place, you heal faster. You recover more completely. You learn more effectively. Because you're not spending all your energy fighting reality or protecting your ego or proving your worth. You're simply experiencing what is, processing it, and moving forward. Let me tell you what this looks like in practice. Because I don't want this to remain abstract. I want you to see how this actually changes the texture of your daily life. You send a message to someone you care about. They don't respond right away. In the old pattern, this would trigger anxiety. You'd check your phone repeatedly. You'd wonder what you did wrong. You'd start crafting better messages in your head, trying to figure out how to fix whatever you broke. Your nervous system would be activated. Your mental energy would be consumed. But with emotional detachment, something different happens. You send the message. You notice the urge to check for a response. You feel it in your body, that slight tension, that pull of anticipation. But you don't obey it. You acknowledge it. Ah, there's the old pattern trying to activate. And then you redirect your attention. You return to what you were doing. You trust that the person will respond when they respond, and their timing has nothing to do with your worth. And hours later, maybe the next day, they respond. And it's fine. It was always going to be fine. They were busy. They were dealing with their own life. And you didn't spend that entire time in anxiety. You didn't waste your precious mental and emotional energy monitoring a situation you couldn't control. You stayed present. You stayed free. That's emotional detachment in action. Or consider this. You're at a gathering. You say something and someone reacts negatively. Their face changes. Their tone sharpens. In the old pattern, you'd immediately internalize this. You'd make it about you. You'd feel shame or guilt or defensiveness rising. You'd spend the rest of the evening in your head, analyzing what happened, trying to fix it, trying to regain their approval. But with emotional detachment, you notice their reaction. You feel your own response beginning to form. But you pause. You create space. You recognize that their reaction belongs to them. It might be about something you said, or it might be about their own triggers, their own wounds, their own stress. You don't know. And you don't need to know. You can stay curious without making it a referendum on your worth. You might choose to check in with them. Hey, I noticed you seemed upset. Is everything okay? Not from a place of desperate need to fix it, but from genuine care. And whatever they say, you can receive it without collapsing. If they're upset with you, you can listen. You can consider whether their feedback has merit. You can apologize if appropriate. But you don't have to take on their emotion. You don't have to make their discomfort your crisis. This is what it means to be strong. Not hard. Not closed. But grounded. Capable of staying with discomfort without being destroyed by it. Capable of caring without being consumed. And here's what's beautiful. When you show up this way, when you're emotionally detached in the true sense, people feel it. They sense your groundedness. Your authenticity. And paradoxically, they trust you more. They connect with you more deeply. Because they're not dealing with someone who needs something from them, someone who's desperately trying to manage their perception. They're dealing with someone who is simply present. Simply real. This is the great irony. The more you detach from the need for connection, the more genuine connection becomes possible. The more you release the need for approval, the more you receive authentic appreciation. The more you stop performing, the more people see and value the real you. But you can't do this strategically. You can't fake detachment to get better results. It doesn't work that way. Detachment has to be genuine. It has to come from a real understanding that your worth is not contingent on external validation. That you are whole, complete, enough, regardless of how others respond to you. And that understanding doesn't come from thinking about it. It comes from practice. From repeatedly choosing to step back. From repeatedly noticing the old patterns and choosing differently. From repeatedly experiencing the fact that the world doesn't end when you stop trying to control it. That you're actually okay when you let things be as they are. Over time, this becomes your new baseline. The anxiety that used to be constant becomes occasional. The mental noise that used to dominate becomes background static that you can tune out. The exhaustion that used to define your existence begins to lift. And in its place, something emerges. Something you might have forgotten was possible. Lightness. Clarity. Space. You start to notice things you were too distracted to see before. The way light moves through a window. The texture of someone's genuine laughter. The satisfaction of being fully present in a single moment. Not anticipating the next one. Not replaying the last one. Just here. Now. Alive. And you realize that this is what you were looking for all along. Not the perfect relationship. Not the flawless career. Not the constant validation. Just the ability to be at peace with yourself. To exist without apology. To move through the world without carrying the weight of it inside you. There's a phrase I want you to remember. Inner peace doesn't begin with escaping the world. It begins with understanding that you don't have to take the world inside you. Read that again. Let it sink in. You don't have to internalize every criticism. You don't have to absorb every emotion around you. You don't have to carry every problem as if it's yours to solve. The world is happening. People are struggling, suffering, celebrating, existing. And you can witness all of it, you can engage with it, you can care about it, without making it your identity. You can stand in the storm and not become the storm. This is the freedom that emotional detachment offers. It's not freedom from life. It's freedom within life. It's the ability to participate fully without being swallowed whole. To love deeply without losing yourself. To care genuinely without being destroyed by caring. And I know this might sound too good to be true. You might be thinking, okay, but what about real responsibilities? What about the people who actually depend on me? I can't just detach from everything. And you're right. This isn't about abandoning responsibility. It's about discerning what's actually your responsibility and what you've taken on unnecessarily. It's about understanding that being responsible doesn't mean being reactive. That being reliable doesn't mean being available every moment. That being caring doesn't mean being consumed. You can be an excellent parent, partner, friend, colleague, and still maintain emotional detachment. In fact, you'll be better at all of these roles when you're not operating from depletion, when you're not giving from an empty cup, when you're not sacrificing yourself in the name of care. Because sustainable care requires boundaries. It requires knowing when to engage and when to step back. It requires the ability to say, I see you're struggling, and I care, but I cannot fix this for you. I can support you, but I cannot carry it for you. And saying that, holding that boundary, is not selfish. It's honest. It's healthy. It's the only way to care for others without destroying yourself. So what does your life look like from here? What becomes possible now that you understand this? You wake up tomorrow and you practice. You notice when the old patterns try to activate. When you reach for your phone compulsively. When you start spiraling into anxiety about someone's response or lack thereof. When you begin taking on someone else's emotion as your own. And in those moments, you pause. You breathe. You remind yourself, this is not mine to carry. And little by little, moment by moment, you reclaim your energy. You reclaim your peace. You reclaim yourself. You start to move through your day differently. Lighter. More present. You engage in conversations without the constant background monitoring. You make decisions based on what feels true to you, not what you think will gain approval. You show up as yourself, imperfect and human and real, and you trust that the right people will respond to that realness. And some people won't. Some people will be confused by your new boundaries. Some will push back against your refusal to absorb their emotions or manage their reactions. Some will call you cold or distant or changed. And that's okay. That's information. It tells you who is connected to the performance and who is capable of connecting with the real you. Let them go if they need to go. Not with bitterness. Not with resentment. But with understanding that not everyone is meant to walk the whole path with you. Some people are in your life for a season, to teach you something, to reflect something back to you. And when that season ends, when the lesson is learned, releasing them is not a failure. It's natural. It's healthy. This is part of emotional detachment too. Knowing that relationships, like everything else, have their own lifespan. And trying to force them beyond their natural endpoint, trying to make someone stay who is ready to leave, trying to be something you're not to keep them, that's not love. That's fear. And fear-based connections are exhausting for everyone involved. So you let things be as they are. You let people be as they are. And in that acceptance, in that releasing of control, you find something unexpected. You find that you're actually more connected, not less. Because now your connections are based on truth, not need. On presence, not performance. On mutual recognition of each other's humanity, not on desperate attempts to extract validation. And these connections, the ones built on this foundation, they sustain you differently. They don't drain you. They don't require constant maintenance. They exist in a space of ease, of allowance, of trust. You can be yourself. They can be themselves. And there's room for both. This is what's on the other side of this work. This is what becomes available when you choose emotional detachment. Not a life without challenges or pain or difficulty. But a life where you're no longer at the mercy of those challenges. A life where you can face what comes without being destroyed by it. A life where you're solid in yourself, regardless of external circumstances. And from that solidity, you can build anything. You can create relationships that actually nourish you. You can pursue work that aligns with your values. You can make choices that reflect who you are, not who you think you should be. You can exist in the world as a whole person, not a collection of reactions and accommodations and fears. This is your birthright. This peace. This freedom. This ability to be yourself without apology. You didn't lose it. You just forgot it was there, buried under years of conditioning, years of trying to be acceptable, years of believing your worth was contingent on external approval. But it's still there. That original you. That unconditioned awareness. That part of you that knows, deeply and unshakably, that you are enough. Not because of what you do or achieve or how others perceive you, but simply because you exist. Emotional detachment is how you return to that knowing. It's how you clear away everything that's been obscuring it. It's how you remember what you've always been, underneath all the noise. So as we close this journey together, I want to leave you with this. You don't need to become someone new. You don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to achieve some perfect state of enlightenment. You just need to stop doing the things that are keeping you from your own peace. Stop carrying what isn't yours. Stop seeking validation from sources that can never truly give it. Stop performing for an audience that doesn't matter. Stop making yourself small to make others comfortable. Stop abandoning yourself in the name of connection. Just stop. And in that stopping, in that space of not doing, you'll discover what's been here all along. The quiet. The stillness. The unshakable knowing that you are okay, exactly as you are, right now. That's not the end of growth. It's the beginning. Because real growth doesn't come from striving to be better. It comes from relaxing into what you already are. From that place of self-acceptance, of inner peace, everything else unfolds naturally. Not because you're forcing it. Not because you're performing it. But because it's the natural expression of who you are when you're not weighed down by everything you've been carrying. So put it down. All of it. The anxiety. The need for control. The desperate search for validation. The belief that you're not enough. Put it down and walk forward lighter. Because the life you've been longing for, the one where you feel free and at peace and genuinely yourself, it's not somewhere far away. It's right here. Waiting for you to simply stop moving away from it. Waiting for you to come home to yourself. And that homecoming, that return to your own center, that's the greatest gift you can give yourself. And the world. Welcome home. Now, let me share something else with you. Something that deepens this understanding even further. Because there are layers to this truth, dimensions to emotional detachment that we haven't fully explored yet. And I want you to see the complete picture, to understand not just what emotional detachment is, but what it makes possible in every area of your existence. Let's talk about your relationship with time. Because one of the most insidious forms of emotional attachment is your relationship with past and future. Think about how much of your mental energy is spent replaying yesterday or rehearsing tomorrow. How much of your life is consumed by regret or anticipation? How rarely you're actually here, in this moment, fully present to what is. This is another weight you're carrying. The weight of a past you cannot change and a future you cannot control. And every moment you spend there, you're abandoning this moment. The only moment where your actual life is happening. The only moment where you have any real power. Emotional detachment extends to time itself. It means releasing your grip on what was and what might be. It means understanding that the past is a story you tell yourself, and that story is always incomplete, always filtered through your current perspective, always shifting. The past doesn't exist anywhere except in your mind. And the version you're carrying, the one that makes you feel guilty or ashamed or afraid, that's just one possible interpretation. You could tell a different story. You could remember the same events through a lens of compassion. Through understanding that you did the best you could with the awareness you had at that time. Through recognition that every mistake was also a lesson, every failure was also information, every painful experience was also growth. But here's the deeper truth. You don't need to spend your energy rewriting the past. You just need to stop letting it dictate your present. You need to recognize that whatever happened then, it's not happening now. Right now, in this moment, you are safe. You are whole. You are free to choose differently. The same applies to the future. All that worry, all that planning, all that trying to control what hasn't happened yet. It's exhausting, isn't it? And it's ultimately futile. Because you cannot control the future. You can influence it through your present actions, yes. But you cannot guarantee any particular outcome. Life is too complex, too interconnected, too full of variables you cannot predict. So what do you do instead? You show up now. You make the best choice available to you in this moment. You take the next right step. And then you release your attachment to how it should turn out. You trust that whatever unfolds will be what you need to learn, to grow, to evolve. This doesn't mean you stop planning or setting goals. It means you hold those plans and goals lightly. You recognize them as preferences, not requirements. As directions, not destinations. You move toward them without being enslaved by them. Without making your peace contingent on achieving them. Because here's what happens when you're attached to a specific future. You miss what's actually available to you now. You're so focused on getting somewhere else that you can't appreciate where you are. And ironically, this attachment often prevents you from reaching your goals. Because you're operating from tension, from striving, from the belief that you're not okay until you get there. And that energy, that vibration of not enough yet, it permeates everything you do. But when you're detached from the outcome, when you're focused on the process rather than the result, something shifts. You become more effective. More creative. More open to possibilities you couldn't have predicted. Because you're not rigidly attached to one specific path. You can pivot when needed. You can recognize opportunities you would have missed. You can enjoy the journey instead of just enduring it until you reach some imagined destination. This is the paradox again. The less attached you are to getting what you want, the more likely you are to create something meaningful. Because you're not operating from desperation. You're operating from abundance. From the understanding that you're already whole, already enough, and whatever you create from here is just expression, not compensation. Let's go deeper. Let's talk about your relationship with your own mind. Because this is perhaps the most intimate form of attachment, and the one that causes the most suffering. Your identification with your thoughts. Your belief that you are your mind. But you're not. Your mind is a tool. A powerful, sophisticated, incredible tool. But it's not you. You are the awareness that witnesses the mind. The consciousness that observes thoughts arising and passing. And when you recognize this, when you create even a small amount of space between yourself and your thinking, everything changes. Because most of your suffering comes from believing your thoughts. From taking them as truth rather than recognizing them as temporary mental events. When your mind says, "Nobody likes me," you believe it. When it says, "I'm going to fail," you accept it as fact. When it says, "I should be further along by now," you make it your identity. But these thoughts, they're not facts. They're interpretations. Opinions. Often, they're old programming, running automatically, repeating patterns that were installed years ago by people who had their own wounds, their own fears, their own limitations. And you've been carrying these thought patterns as if they're truth, as if they're you, without ever questioning them. Emotional detachment from your thoughts means observing them without believing them. It means noticing when your mind is catastrophizing, judging, comparing, criticizing, and instead of getting swept up in that narrative, you can simply acknowledge, "That's a thought. That's my mind doing its thing." But it's not necessarily true. This creates profound freedom. Because suddenly you're not at the mercy of every passing thought. You're not hijacked by every fear or worry or insecurity that floats through your consciousness. You can let them come and go like clouds moving across the sky. Present, but not permanent. Visible, but not solid. There, but not you. And as you practice this, as you create more and more space between yourself and your thinking, you start to notice something remarkable. There's a quietness underneath all the mental noise. A stillness that's always been there, waiting to be discovered. And in that stillness, there's peace. There's clarity. There's a sense of okayness that doesn't depend on anything external. This is your true nature. Not the anxious, worried, insecure thoughts, but the awareness that watches those thoughts. The consciousness that remains stable and present regardless of what's moving through it. And the more you rest in that awareness, the less power your thoughts have over you. You start to see them for what they are. Not commands. Not prophecies. Not truths. Just mental activity. Sometimes useful. Sometimes not. Sometimes worth paying attention to. Sometimes better to ignore. But never, ever the whole of who you are. Now let's talk about one of the most difficult areas to practice detachment. Your relationship with your body. With your physical appearance. With how you're seen and perceived in the material world. This is where so much suffering lies. The comparison. The judgment. The constant monitoring and critiquing and wishing you were different. The belief that if you could just change this one thing about how you look, then you'd finally be acceptable. Then you'd finally be enough. But that day never comes, does it? Because the problem isn't your body. The problem is your relationship with your body. The problem is that you've been taught to see your physical form as something to evaluate rather than something to inhabit. As an object to be judged rather than a vehicle to be honored. Your body is not you. It's what you're currently living in. It's how you interface with the physical world. And it's temporary. It's changing every single day, every single moment. Cells dying and regenerating. Skin aging. Hair growing and graying. Bones becoming more brittle or more strong depending on how you use them. Attaching your identity, your worth, your sense of okayness to something so impermanent, so subject to time and circumstance and factors beyond your control, that's a recipe for endless suffering. Because no matter how good it looks now, it will change. No matter how much you control it, age will have its way. No matter how much approval you get for your appearance today, that approval is conditional and temporary. Emotional detachment from your body means recognizing its impermanence. Its neutrality. Its simple existence as a form, a collection of matter and energy that allows you to have this human experience. And from that recognition, something beautiful can emerge. Not indifference. Not neglect. But genuine care. When you're not desperately trying to make your body into something it's not, when you're not at war with it, when you're not using it as a measure of your worth, you can actually take care of it properly. You can nourish it. Move it. Rest it. Not as punishment or control, but as care. As gratitude for this remarkable biological system that allows you to experience life in form. And you can release the need for it to look a certain way for others. The need for it to generate approval or validation or desire. You can let it simply be what it is. Unique. Imperfect. Entirely yours. And in that acceptance, you free yourself from one of the most pervasive forms of suffering in our culture. Because the truth is, no one is thinking about your body as much as you are. No one is cataloging your flaws the way you do. Most people are too busy worrying about their own appearance to spend much time evaluating yours. And the ones who do judge you harshly, their judgment says everything about them and nothing about you. It reveals their own insecurities, their own attachments, their own suffering. You don't need their approval. You never did. And the sooner you release the need for it, the sooner you can inhabit your body as your own, as the unique expression of consciousness that it is, without apology and without shame. Let's shift now to another dimension of this work. Your relationship with money and material possessions. Because this is another area where attachment creates immense suffering, and detachment creates immense freedom. The belief that happiness lives on the other side of a certain bank balance. That security comes from accumulation. That your worth is measured by what you own or earn or display. These are lies sold to you by a culture that profits from your dissatisfaction. And they keep you trapped in an endless cycle of wanting, getting, adapting, and wanting more. This isn't to say money doesn't matter. Of course it matters. In a material world, you need resources to meet your basic needs. To have shelter and food and safety. And beyond that, money can provide comfort, freedom, opportunities. These are real and valuable. But there's a critical difference between having money and being attached to money. Between using resources wisely and making them your identity. Between appreciating material comfort and believing that more stuff will finally make you happy. Emotional detachment from money means recognizing it for what it is. A tool. A form of energy exchange. A resource that flows in and out of your life. Nothing more, nothing less. Not a measure of your worth. Not a source of lasting happiness. Not something to hoard out of fear or spend compulsively to fill an inner emptiness. When you're detached from money, you can engage with it more skillfully. You can make clearer decisions about earning, spending, saving, giving. You can enjoy what you have without constantly reaching for more. You can experience loss without being destroyed by it. You can hold abundance lightly, knowing it's temporary, knowing that your true security comes from within, not from your bank account. And the same applies to possessions. All those things you own, or that own you. The clothes, the gadgets, the furniture, the collections. How much of your mental energy is consumed by wanting them, protecting them, maintaining them, comparing them to what others have? Emotional detachment means recognizing that these are just objects. They have functional value, sometimes aesthetic value, but they have no inherent power to make you happy or worthy or complete. They're tools you use, not treasures that define you. And when you see them this way, you can enjoy them without being enslaved by them. You can appreciate a beautiful home without needing it to be perfect. You can use technology without being addicted to it. You can own nice things without letting them own you. And you can release things when it's time, without feeling like you're losing part of yourself. Because you're not your possessions. You're not your portfolio. You're not your earning potential or your credit score or the size of your house. These are circumstances of your current life situation. They will fluctuate. They will change. Attaching your identity to them is building your sense of self on quicksand. Build it instead on what's permanent. On the awareness that persists regardless of external circumstances. On the inner knowing that you are whole, you are enough, you are valuable simply because you exist. Not because of what you have or don't have. Not because of what you've accumulated or achieved. But because consciousness is expressing itself through your unique form, and that in itself is miraculous. Now I want to address something that might be stirring in you as you read this. A kind of resistance. A voice that says, but if I detach from everything, if I stop caring about outcomes and appearances and approval, won't I lose my motivation? Won't I become passive, complacent, stuck? This is such an important question. And the answer reveals something crucial about the nature of true motivation versus the motivation that comes from lack. When you're emotionally attached, your motivation comes from fear. From the belief that you're not okay now, but you might be okay if you achieve this thing, get that thing, become that person. This kind of motivation is exhausting. It's driven by the desperate need to escape your current state. To prove something. To finally be enough. And yes, this fear-based motivation can produce results. It can push you to work hard, to achieve external success, to check boxes and climb ladders. But at what cost? The cost is your peace. Your presence. Your authentic self. Because you're not creating from inspiration. You're running from inadequacy. Emotional detachment doesn't eliminate motivation. It transforms it. Now you're motivated by curiosity instead of fear. By genuine interest instead of desperate need. By the joy of creation instead of the terror of not being enough. And this kind of motivation, this inspiration-based motivation, is sustainable. It doesn't burn you out. It doesn't require constant pushing and forcing. It flows naturally from who you are when you're not weighted down by fear. Think about children. How they learn and create and play. They're not motivated by the fear of failure or the desperate need for approval. They're motivated by pure interest. By the joy of discovery. By the satisfaction of mastering something new. And they learn faster, create more freely, enjoy the process more fully than adults who are paralyzed by the fear of not being good enough. Emotional detachment allows you to return to that state. To engage with life from curiosity rather than compulsion. To create from fullness rather than emptiness. And ironically, this often leads to better results than fear-based motivation ever could. Because you're not constrained by the need to do things perfectly. You're not sabotaged by the fear of judgment. You're free to experiment, to fail, to learn, to grow. So no, detachment doesn't make you passive. It makes you powerful. It gives you the freedom to act without being paralyzed by the need for a specific outcome. To show up fully without being destroyed if things don't go as planned. To engage wholeheartedly while remaining centered in yourself. Let me share with you now what I consider to be the deepest level of emotional detachment. The level that, once truly understood and embodied, transforms everything. This is detachment from your own story. From the narrative you've been telling yourself about who you are. You have a story. A coherent narrative about your life, your past, your personality, your limitations, your possibilities. This story feels true. It feels like you. But it's not. It's just a story. A collection of interpretations, selected memories, meanings you've assigned to events, identities you've claimed or been given. And this story, this narrative self, it constrains you. It keeps you behaving in predictable ways. It limits what you believe is possible for you. It keeps you stuck in patterns that may have made sense at one point but no longer serve you. And perhaps most importantly, it keeps you from recognizing the truth of what you are beyond any story. Because underneath this narrative, underneath all the roles and identities and beliefs about yourself, there's something else. Something that was there before you learned to call yourself by a name. Something that will remain when all the stories fall away. Pure awareness. Pure consciousness. Pure being. This is not some mystical or esoteric concept. It's the most direct, immediate truth available to you. Right now, as you read these words, there is awareness happening. There is consciousness present. And that consciousness is not defined by your past, your personality, your circumstances, your thoughts, your emotions, or your stories. It simply is. When you recognize this, when you experience even a moment of your existence beyond story, beyond identity, beyond all the definitions you've been carrying, it's like waking up from a dream you didn't know you were having. And suddenly all that weight, all that heavy identity you've been defending and maintaining and trying to make acceptable, it reveals itself as optional. You don't have to be the person you think you are. That person is just a character in a story. A useful fiction that helps you navigate social reality, but not the truth of what you are. And the more you identify with the awareness rather than the character, the freer you become. This doesn't mean you lose your personality or become some kind of blank, emotionless being. It means you hold your personality lightly. You recognize it as a pattern, a tendency, a way of showing up, but not as a prison.